Hi, welcome everybody. Welcome to our 8th session of our UK Anthology series. So we're nearing the end of our 10 sessions. The UK Anthology series, for those who don't know, is a collection of webinars that we've been preparing surrounding peatlands and the UK in the build up to the COP26 and also to the World Congress on Soil Science, as these are both taking place in Glasgow. So as the whole world will be looking to the UK during these conferences, we really wanted to push the UK to take some more ambitious action in addressing and transforming their relationships to their peatlands. So this episode today will be focusing on COP26 as it's right around the corner, and we really wanted to build some momentum around it. We are first going to hear from some RE-PEAT members. They will be talking about their experience as young people organizing around COP. We will also hear from Raki Ap, who will be discussing indigenous-led conservation, West Papua's green state vision, and environmental and social justice. Finally, Deirdre Lane will be sharing a poetic rant, as she calls it, that explores peat mining in Ireland. So Frankie, go ahead if you would like to go.
Thank you for the introduction. Should we share the screen? Nice. So, can everyone see the screen? Yes. We just wanted to start off this session talking a little bit about the role of youth in this process, because we think that youth have a very strong voice, and they are a really important stakeholder when it comes to climate change, as young people will be the ones actually dealing, well, along with people that are dealing with the consequences now. It will be young people that are also dealing with these impacts. And over the past couple of years, we've seen young people mobilize in big numbers. We've seen these, across the world, children literally getting out of school and taking to the streets in protest. And we've also seen young people start advocacy actions. We've seen young people do civil disobedience, lots of different kind of approaches. And one of the approaches that we wanted to discuss today is the LCOY. So the LCOY is basically short for Local Conference of the Youth. And this is connected to the UNFCCC process. So if you can see in the diagram, you have the COP, which is the Conference of Parties, and that's where COP26 comes from. And then every time you have a COP, you'll also have a COY, which is a youth version of the COP. And this is organised through YOUNGO, which is the youth constituency of the UNFCCC. And on top of, alongside the COY, you also have local COYs. So these are basically happening in different places around the world. And I have some statistics on another part of my screen. Yes. So over the past couple of years, young people have been organising these conferences. I think the first one was in 2014, and since then there's been over 160 conferences organised in 70 plus countries with 25,000 youth engaged. And these conferences are really a way of sharing knowledge, catalysing action and creating political change. And can we go to the next slide? Yes, and this is basically a map of all the LCOYs that are happening this year. So it's quite a feat to show, especially a lot of countries in the global south. You see really organising themselves. So it's really impressive, and it's such a strong network. So all of these kind of come together and they all feed into the to the COP process through Youngo. So yeah, that was a little bit of an intro into LCOY, and now Beth is going to talk a little bit. Oh, next slide. I just wanted to share some of the 10 principles of LCOY, which I think are quite nice. So the first is capacity building and empowerment, transparency, inclusivity, sustainability, by youth, for youth, community building, and preparation. And then the second part is about the preparation for United Nations process, and taking a bit more of a global outlook, and cooperation and creativity. Yeah, so I'm gonna hand you over to Beth, who's gonna talk a bit about our experiences with this process.
I just unmute myself. So yeah, basically quite a few members of the RE-PEAT team actually were involved in the local conference of youth that was in the Netherlands. So both in 2018 and 2019, and I have some kind of mixed photos here from both years. So yeah, what we kind of wanted to speak about was a little bit kind of the feeling that we had when we organized it. And I think that it was like different for each of us, but I think especially in the first year, for a lot of us, I think it's the first kind of real organizing experience that we've been having around like climate action, even though we were involved maybe in other groups before and stuff like that. So I think the effect it had on a lot of us was really quite profound, I think, in terms of the kind of camaraderie that was with the team, and this kind of like enthusiasm and mentality that we really felt like we were doing something to change, and kind of adding our voices to the story and helping promote other voices. And really, it was like quite an interesting experience for all of that. And I think a lot of us have gone on to stay involved in different movements, as well as kind of be still quite close to each other. And you see that also, I think, with RE-PEAT. I think there are maybe 4, 5, 6 of us who were involved in LCOY at some point that like now are part of RE-PEAT as well. So I think it was also quite interesting. We have a nice little link there ourselves. So then in 2018, a bunch of us afterwards went to Poland to the Global Conference of Youth, which was also like, I think we were all very caught up in this moment of feeling like we were contributing and creating change. And it was a very, I don't know if I can really put into words, and maybe one of the others also has a similar experience that they can kind of explain it as, only that it just left such a deep impression, I think. And we kind of went through such a roller coaster with like, I remember like moments of like complete despair as well. And that's always something that like, it's like maybe hard to talk about, or as a group, we want to also have a more positive way of speaking about it and being engaged with it. But there was moments as well of like, just like really like despair, I think, as well. And then also lots of hope. And it was very, very interesting. So when we went to Poland for the global COY, a lot of that was still there. And I think at the end, a lot of us also felt quite deflated, because we maybe felt like we were on the path to change and all of this great stuff was happening, but with us, with the youth, not kind of so much in the conference itself. So then we came back again and organized it again in 2019. And then, oh, actually, this is Raki in 2018 that I wanted to show as well. So we came again in 2019 and we're organizing it. And I think also already ourselves have gone through a lot of transformation to make it a bit more climate justice focused as well, kind of reflecting on what we felt were the messages that we wanted to share. And that was already a huge learning curve, I think, that a lot of us had gone through in that year. It was also a year when a lot of us had learned, or a few of us had learned about peatlands as well. And so we presented about peatlands in the LCOY in the Netherlands, and then had our first recruit as well, which was also super nice. And he joined the team after having a brainstorm with us. And then the other thing that I wanted to then say, we have Raki here, who you'll see in a minute again, was then that a bunch of us went to COP25 in Madrid. And as we just started creating RE-PEAT at this moment, we had our very first presentation at the counter COP that was going on, which you can see in the top right. Which was, we had about 2 people in the session, and it was basically just us saying, we found out about peatlands and we think we should do something. What do you think we should do? And It's kind of remarkable as well, kind of the change that's gone on as well, I suppose. So I went into the COP as well, and I visited the peatland area, which was also very interesting. And now a lot of the people that were kind of speaking there, we also are talking to and doing stuff with the Peatland Pavilion, which Jamie will talk about in a second. So it's also like a nice little arc. And what I really wanted to also highlight here, which is the same, I think, for the upcoming conference as well in Glasgow, is the importance also of the counter COP. So here it's the yellow agenda here that we had our talk in, La Cumbre Social. And this was a space that was open to everyone rather than needing accreditation like the COP itself. And because, of course, the COP was supposed to be held in Chile that year, but then was moved to Spain in the last minute, it was really focused as well on highlighting indigenous voices, specifically from South America. And it was then kind of the people that we maybe throughout the LCOY experience and going to the COY and stuff, the people who maybe like we wanted to see in the front the entire time, you know, all of these times when we felt like we've been maybe let down by the COP and stuff like that. It was wonderful to kind of be involved in a conference where kind of all the real leaders were being found, I think. So that was just a few reflections that we had about kind of LCOY and COP and visiting those. And I don't know if I have another slide. Oh, I do. This is the zine that we made, that we gave out at that at the first conference that we went to. I just wanted to share that as well. And then I think I'm going to pass over to Jamie, who's going to speak a little bit more about like how peatlands have fit into the COP, and kind of this year how they're fitting in. So Jamie, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Oh, yeah. So can you go to the next slide as well? So yeah, peatlands in the COP. This is peat, for in case anyone wasn't aware. And for the first time, there's going to be a dedicated peatland pavilion in Glasgow. So one of the actual like official pavilions in COP26 in the main conference is going to be like dedicated to all things peatland, and that's coordinated and organized by several groups, which are on the next slide. You can see here. Is that flicking? There, yeah. So these groups have all coordinated that, and that's going to be like a physical and also a virtual space, COP26, where different groups and individuals can come together and build connections to kind of elevate peatlands in the climate policy agenda. So what's cool is that, you know, these different people coming together at the Peatland Pavilion will have different roles and relationships to peatlands. So it will include ministers, experts, activists, and enthusiasts from around the world. And then there's also going to be events throughout the 2 weeks happening in the Peatland Pavilion to delve into particular issues related to peatlands and focus on the position of peatlands in particular areas in the world. So these range from sessions on peatland science, including monitoring and mapping methodologies. There's a day examining peatland policy in good amount of detail. There's another looking at successful case studies, and also a session that RE-PEAT is leading on youth and peatlands. So if you go to the next slide, this is something we wrote recently in the style of a UN agreement, which I'll leave here for a moment to read. And, you know, actually, I think I'll just read it out. Why not? So being members of the engaged youth in Glasgow for the Conference of Parties, pursuant to attending and engaging with grassroots activity in Glasgow, in virtual COP side events and hosting a session at the Peatland Pavilion, in pursuit of environmental, climate, digital, and medical/vaccine justice, and ensuring a healthy, peaceful future for the generations to come, recognizing the need for effective and reliable protection of the natural environment, including but not limited to wetlands, peatlands, and marshes, but also recognizing the need for these actions to be rooted in principles of climate justice, taking full account of the vital role peatlands have in a viable climate and ecological future, and the historical, cultural, and innate value, recognizing the potential of COP26 to set in motion long overdue and incredibly important action, but also the lack of real action taken at the past 25 COP events, emphasizing the importance of youth in decision-making processes as future stewards of this planet and all the challenges they will face in doing so. Noting the lack of action by political leaders intent on appeasing themselves and wealthy individuals and corporations, and on satisfying short-term goals with regard to election cycles, have agreed as follows: to push for global peatland appreciation and protection, to demand necessary action on the climate and ecological crisis to follow the spoken and written words of world leaders, to be in solidarity with activists from around the world, specifically marginalized communities and those currently experiencing the climate crisis, to contribute our capacities to build a counterpower to business as usual, call out the limits and weaknesses of COP, and support grassroots action at, around, and beyond COP, to take care of each other in these times of crisis, to contribute towards positive, honest, and imaginative narratives for the cause of our societies. So one of our core values at RE-PEAT is collaboration, and we hope that dialogue and connections between everyone who interacts through the Peatland Pavilion at COP will help shift the peatland paradigm. But as well as being the main conference, we'll also be present at COP26 side events, and as Bethany highlighted, like the importance of these counter events. So that will include like the People's Summit, the Youth Hub, and the Feminist Exchange Network. And here we're super looking forward to further collaborating and building alliances with a much wider range of people, and provide extra capacity for climate justice action around the COP. And we'll be reporting throughout on that on our social media channels about our experiences. And if you are in Glasgow and want to meet us there, then send us a message. We're happy. We always wanted to strengthen our network of young peatland and climate justice advocates. So that'll be really exciting. And yeah, so that's RE-PEAT at the COP.
Thank you, Jamie. And Bethany and Frankie. Next up is our next speaker, Raki Ap. Raki is a decolonial storyteller, and he's committed to making the connection between human rights and climate activism. He's also a key spokesperson of the Free West Papua campaign, both in the Netherlands and internationally. You will often find Raki speaking with journalists, politicians, at rallies and at schools about socio-political and environmental situations in West Papua. And some of our team actually got to know him while he was speaking at the LCOY in 2017 and in 2018. His powerful way of communicating such a complex and painful reality has made a profound impression on many people who have ended up sharing this story even further. So as part of COP26, Raki will be presenting the Green State Vision, which he will be sharing with us today. Go ahead, Raki. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bianca, for the wonderful introduction. Before I start sharing my screen, I once again want to thank Frankie and the entire team of RE-PEAT for giving me this opportunity and the privilege to represent and be a voice for the indigenous people of West Papua, who are constantly living under fear and intimidation. And I'm really thankful for this opportunity to share my story and experiences with you, to see how we can, working closer together, collaborate to create the momentum the mankind desperately need. So yeah, let me start the presentation, and I think I've practiced it, so I think 10 minutes will work. Keep it on 50 minutes, and then we will have enough time to go into depth. So please write your questions down, and please ask them at the end, because that's where the magic happens, as Bethany and the others know from the LCOY sessions in the Netherlands, which I enjoyed very much. So let me see how I can make this a full screen. Does that work? Oh no, this is not. I need the first slide. Here we go. We got the full screen now, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's great.
I see thumbs up. All right. So let me start at the beginning. So at the end, you will understand why I share the entire context of what is happening in West Papua. to make the connection to the bigger picture and the connection to peatlands, which I discovered very recently, and which is very interesting also from my point of view and from your point of view as well. Yeah, what is happening on the island of New Guinea and West Papua, where I'm from, and why it is very relevant for what is happening in the world regarding the climate and biodiversity crisis. So for those who doesn't know where West Papua is, you can see the, the pointer right over there above Australia. That's the island of New Guinea, and West Papua is the western half of that part. So yeah, my name is Raki Ap and I'm the spokesperson of Free West Papua campaign. It was launched by our independence leader, which is currently the interim president of the indigenous government, just launched this year. Really excited that I have this honor to represent our campaign. And the task is very simple: educate people around the world what is happening in occupied West Papua. And that's what I'm doing basically besides my work every single day. And so as you can see, zoom in, the island of New Guinea, the western half is West Papua, and unfortunately it is part of the Indonesia we know today, and the eastern part is the independent state of Papua New Guinea. But you know, we see it as one island, which was for thousands of years until colonization started. You see this clear line which is breaking the island in two. And as you can see, the people who live on the island are both indigenous, they dress the same, they look the same, and they're clearly part of the Pacific islands and the cultures and ethnicity and so on. So why understanding what is happening in West Papua, as I mentioned before, is very relevant to tackle the climate and biodiversity crisis. We go a little back into the history by starting with this number, which is one of the outcomes of the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which have stated just 5% of world's population exists of indigenous peoples, and their way of life have preserved more than 80% of the remaining biodiversity. That is a fundamental outcome. At the same time, these reports are showing that 96% of all deforestation is due to palm oil, soya, cattle, fossil fuels happening on the same indigenous lands. So on the one hand, these are the peoples who are protecting our crucial frontline areas, and at the same time, their lands are the frontline area where the climate crisis basically started. And reflecting on the country, on my island, this is what nature.com described. New Guinea Island is the world's largest tropical island, houses one of the most richest island flora and fauna in the world. So you should expect that every environmental organization should know what is happening there. Well, the opposite is what I found out the last 2 years, and that's the problematic thing, which made me, from a freedom fighter, also indigenous climate change activist. I was connecting the important dots. And this is what I found out due to a task of dear sister Frankie. And what I realized is that I read an article about the peatland in Papua New Guinea, and this is what this environmental department within Papua New Guinea have shown, that in Papua New Guinea there's about 2,000 plus square meter of montane peatland. And the sentence below, which was shocked me, and Papua province, which is West Papua, the Indonesian part of the island of New Guinea, probably contains much more, which make the island of New Guinea, if you put the line from west to east, is about 2,000 plus kilometers. So there will be a rough estimation that at least 4,500 square meters of montane peatland on the area. That's huge, right? That's huge. If you compare it to the most of the unique hotspots in the world, housing the second/third largest rainforest, but this is a natural-based carbon sink. So when deforestation is happening in the mountains due to this world's biggest gold mine, you can imagine, and these palm oil companies and fossil fuels, what kind of carbon bomb there will exist. So that makes this an interesting area for those who wanted to know what's happening there. But the fact is, nobody knows what is happening there for the last 60 years. That's why I'm educating people. So what happened? West Papua was a former Dutch colony, and I made the timeline just to pinpoint the short history. Let's say from the 1900s, West Papua was part of the Dutch East Indies, and after the Indonesian independence war in 1945, 1949, we got a different status, which was the Netherlands and New Guinea. They prepared the West Papuans. You can see here the first government. We got a flag and towards the right to self-determination, the decolonization phase in the early 60s, but it didn't happen. How we got our flag in 1961, a year later, in 1962, under huge pressure of the United States and the UN, the Netherlands was forced to hand over West Papua to the Indonesia we know today. Without the consultation of the indigenous West Papuans. And as former military servant, I can tell you that these unique pictures, that the West Papua Morning Star flag was hoisted on a Dutch submarine and painted on the tail of an airplane, is very unique. It shows the unique bond that both countries share, West Papua and the Netherlands, or how it has been forgotten. Even today, I have to educate history teachers about this timeline in the Netherlands. That students on the universities are shocked. They don't know that this is part of their history as well. Because in 1969, there was a so-called referendum where just 1,026 men were handpicked on gunpoint. And if they didn't vote for integration to Indonesia, they and their family were killed. And that was the referendum. And so we got a new colonizer. And these are the evidence nowadays commemorating the West Papuan comrades who've died alongside them every day at the Papuan monument in the Netherlands. So what happened after that? When we transferred immediately, Indonesia colonized us with a military invasion in 1963. And these are the images, as you can see, these are colorful images. So this is from the recent years. From day one, in 1963, Indonesia invaded us, the human rights violation started. And let me go one back. And since that day, you can see here a picture, no press allowed. Since day one, Indonesia invaded West Papua, there's foreign media have been banned until this day. And human rights violations, lynch, torture, slavery kind of situations continuously happening in West Papua. And these reports are online. The title says everything of NGOs such as Amnesty International, Don't Bother, Just Let Them Die, Killing with Impunity in West Papua. This is a daily reality for us. And these are one of those parties who play a huge part in the situation there. The world's largest gold mine owned by US mining corporation Freeport, which is also the second largest copper mine right in the heart of West Papua, paying the Indonesian military directly for so-called security. And also one of BP's largest LNG exploration sites is located in West Papua. Once at the expenses of our land, our culture, and our lives. And the recent years, these palm oil companies are coming in after all the forest in Indonesia, Borneo, Kalimantan have been cut off. West Papua has been described as the next frontier. So this is like the daily images for a lot of indigenous West Papuans. And this is what happened if indigenous people's rights are not protected. The world's largest tropical island is at stake. And within a future where climate and biodiversity collapse is there, these frontline areas are very important. People must know what is happening there. And instead of that, environmental organizations campaigned about the rights of indigenous peoples, they campaign about nature, which we should support, of course, but they campaign about orangutans. What about indigenous lives who've lived there in peace for more than 40,000 years? If they cared about our lives, this forest and trees were still there. This is the indigenous narrative on climate change. So how is it possible that such a frontline area and about regarding biodiversity, forest, and so on is so, people doesn't know what is happening there, including huge environmental organization. In that deadly silence, this climate crisis could happen. Because if we know what was happened there, we could protect, for example, what is happening in the Amazon or in other parts of the world where we have got these kind of hotspots. But because there's no media coverage, because environmental organizations are focusing on plants and animals and not on human beings who live there in balance, this climate crisis could continue happening with the wrong narratives shedding into the world. So the challenge is clear. We must be the media ourselves. We must educate people. We must educate environmental organizations, students, policymakers, and that's what we did with our campaign. Event by event, we traveled across the Netherlands and Europe to bring in what is happening in West Papua. University students, anthropology in the Netherlands, and this last year, Quonia was an epic year, but also environmental organizations. They must change the narrative. It's not about, you know, the animals and the trees. Yes, we care about them. The indigenous peoples know the best how we should care of them. So that's what we educated them with, the so-called decolonial indigenous perspective on climate change. And it is happening this year. So we're changing the narrative within the climate change movement, and also with Greenpeace, Netherlands, Indonesia, West Papua. But also we need the mainstream media to change the focus to what really matters. What the first priority should be, which is, you know, genocides, which is ecocide. That's what they should focus every day, and not those silly, you know, subjects which we see on a daily basis. The momentum is getting bigger, and we are very optimistic because we see the support and awareness growing every single day, from musicians, ordinary musicians, singers, dancers, to you know, Hollywood stars, Archbishop Desmond Tutu. People are finding out what is happening there. This deadly silence has been broken. And Lush Cosmetics, painters who are doing their part within the capacity, that is the big changing. That's the foundation of our campaign. Citizens and, you know, small businesses, big businesses, and nowadays environmental organizations being an ally for us. And that is, you know, it's a win-win situation. We can make each other's campaign and story stronger by listening what is happening in the front line. And this is the, you know, the collaborations we've created the last 2-3 years with LCOY, with all this other environmental movement, grassroots movements, politicians, media, collaborating and bringing this important perspective to the center of whatever, every party who should know about it. And, you know, our liberation movement is excited because we created so much momentum from West Papua, knowing that we have no freedom. We are now becoming a observer member within a sub-regional organization, which is the Melanesian Spearhead Group. And we hope it can be upgraded to full membership, and then we will write history. We got an international voice. So that is a huge change. So we also, because of the campaign, we have, you know, civil society backing up our campaign. You know, West Papua become a top 3 within the Pacific Island Forum agenda. So this is huge. And we got the United Nations now, you know, briefing updates about the human rights situation in West Papua. So that's really good. And we got, you know, as you can see, more than 2 million people, which is almost every indigenous West Papuan supporting our campaign and focusing on the right to self-determination to bring forward. So that's really optimistic from the front line. And now this year we got more than 80 countries demanding a United Nations human fact-finding mission to West Papua. So this is about the global momentum which we have created in the last 10 years since our campaign was launched. So a brief summary about what I've just mentioned about the island of New Guinea as world's largest tropical island, that it's a very unique and important biodiversity hotspot. I've thought about the history, Dutch colony, from Dutch colony to Indonesian colony, about the current situation, / genocide, ecocide, and the multinational exploitation of our resources. So this is the moment. So what's the link between this story, COP26, and the climate crisis? Well, you've seen this slide. That just 5% of world's population consists of indigenous peoples, and that their way of life have preserved more than 80% of world's biodiversity. This one I've also shown in one of the first slides, but this is why I became an indigenous climate change activist. This is the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, which are clearly saying ensuring the collective rights of indigenous peoples to lands, territories, and resources is not only for their well-being, but also for addressing some of the most pressing global challenges, such as the climate change and environmental degradation. The numbers are very clear. the most obvious solution to tackle the climate crisis is to, protect indigenous rights and give back control to their lands, which they've managed for more than centuries. And this is why we are going to launch the Green State Vision. This has been outlined by a law firm in the UK, specialized in law and constitutions. They've built up this vision outlines, confirm the best practices of democracies, international law, and we have centered our indigenous value of life, how we've managed this island for centuries and keep it in balance, respecting tribal democracy and implement it to the democratic process we know today. That is what we're going to launch, and fulfilling basically their words, because it is beautiful on paper, but as you know, leaders don't know where to start. Everybody's talking about biodiversity stuff. We got another summit about the climate crisis, but the crisis is getting worse and worse, but the numbers are clear. So this is where we wanted to play in and show them you don't have to think about it, it's on paper. And I can share it with you. I've already shared it with the team of RE-PEAT. You can share it with each other if you want to know more, but this is our big agenda at COP26. I will be there entire 2 weeks to join panel discussions and to just pitch about the importance of indigenous perspectives on climate change, and that West Papuans are ready to take back control and lead the world a way out of the climate crisis. That's it from my side. Thank you for listening, and shoot if there are any questions and we can go into that. I will stop screen sharing. I want to thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Raki. That was really, really moving and powerful. I actually have 2 questions if nobody has any prepared, or maybe this can be an opportunity for people to start preparing some questions. Is that okay? Yeah. So my first question is if you're aware of to what extent peatlands are currently under threat today, and follow up to that, what industry and what demands are driving this?
Yeah, that is an interesting question, which I hope I can answer partly, because the situation is not, I have no exact update about the current situation on the ground. But what I do know is that I've read in this article, which I've shared in my slide, that peatlands are up on the island of New Guinea starts at 1,000 feet, if I say that correctly. So that's the mountain areas as particularly, and that is exactly where these mining corporations are located, and where now at this moment a so-called transnational highway is being built, so-called for development, but we know it is for businesses to to make entrance. So that is the risk at this moment. As long as these roads are being there, these industries will come in and investors will come in, and that's where we are very afraid of, because we've seen what this world's largest gold mine and BP and palm oil already have done to the environment and to the people's lives. So I think that is the first answer. And what was the second one? Sorry.
Yeah, the follow-up was just what industry and demands are driving this, but you answered it already. BP and development. And I guess I was also wondering in West Papua, what is the main way that they're destroyed? Would it be through draining, extraction, or because in the Netherlands, we experience a lot of drainage to make room for cattle. But it seems like maybe in West Papua, it's
we got, as far as I know, palm oil is a big threat, and we got now a lot of illegal mining, which I don't know where exactly, but this is military controlled area. So, and also the so-called energy projects, which they started, which will happening in those kinds of areas. So what we're trying to do is now monitoring certain areas to see where this deforestation is happening and what kind of activities it is, because NGOs and media have been banned. So that's the other side, dark side, is that they have free space to do whatever they want, where they want, and we have not that much control to monitor what is happening there. So these are some limits from our side to put pressure, see what is happening there.
Exactly. Yeah. Frankie also had a question about nature-based solutions.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my question was, you were speaking a little bit about changing the narrative, right? Like stop talking about the orangutans when people are seriously, there's human rights issues happening right in front of you. And there's a lot of conversation happening around this term nature-based solutions. So, and that's also big, it's going to be a big push at the COP, this idea of nature-based solutions and peatlands. If you look at the European context and you say peatlands as nature-based solutions, it's very different to kind of, if you take that to different parts of the world, of course, because of course then peatlands are maybe a better solution than kind of a tech fix. So if you look at it like that, in that kind of binary, then yeah, nature-based solutions. But then I don't know, at this, there was another counter conference at the IUCN summit, which was called Our Land, Our Nature. And a big part of the discussion that was happening at that conference was about the idea of nature-based solutions and this kind of, well, the kind of like fortress conservation that goes on, where you kind of go, okay, like everyone who lives here, get out because we need to protect this area. And the other thing is that, yeah, again, nature-based solutions can kind of lead very quickly into this kind of same mentality when it comes to conservation. And I was wondering whether you had any thoughts about maybe a good way of changing this kind of conversation, or like the way that we think about this, especially when we're talking about different areas.
Yeah, thank you, Frankie. I think, yeah, I follow those discussions well, and some of them are very problematic, especially those that you mentioned, that environmental organizations want to push away indigenous people so the forest will stay in place. That's absolutely nonsense. And, that's, just a racist attitude if you look at the scientists, because they're saying indigenous people have preserved 80% of forest, but they are not the problem. They're the solution. They have shown how they've managed this environment for more than centuries. So this is just, against science itself. And I think what is important, as you mentioned, this nature-based solutions would perfectly work for the context in Europe, for example. So the context within the narrative depends on the place. And my critic regarding, for example, Greenpeace and Friends of the Earth in campaigns in Indonesia is that they shouldn't focus on orangutans because people are dying, are being threatened with a genocide. That doesn't compare. So the context is, is fitted on a specific region. And I think that is the most important, that when you make a campaign on a certain area, bring the stakeholders, important stakeholders of that certain area on the table before you make a campaign or policy. That's logic, but that's exactly what didn't happen the last, 50 years since environmental organizations spend out millions, if not trillions of dollars in ecosystem restoration, biodiversity, and so forth and so forth. So that's, I hope I've partly answered your question, Frankie. If not, please ask a follow-up.
How would you then, you would just, it would just basically be the protect indigenous rights. That would be the main kind of focus. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I think at least bring them on the table. If there's a certain question or you want a solution, they're the most relevant players because, the most of the remaining forest is their land and also the biodiversity. So if you want to talk about biodiversity, well, bring those stakeholders sitting on the table and talk, and then we will see what will come out. But, we can't make a certain solution without the most important stakeholder. And then we can, we can talk, we can think, we can discuss, but it's on an equal way. So it's also about, power sharing. The polluters were always sitting on the table, lobbying with the governments, having a say, and those who've preserved our crucial ecosystems were basically denied having a say on the table. So it's the opposite. If you look at those who know how to protect forest and biodiversity, have been left out of every decision making of every power circle. So it's about, you know, who do we want to sit on the table the upcoming 10 years? And I think the ones who've contributed, you know, the less, those, the marginalized group that haven't done, you know, any carbon emissions and who are suffering right now should have a bigger say than those who've contributed, let's say the global north and other polluters. I think that's it's a matter of power sharing as well, and then bring people together. And I think that's where the best solutions will come out. I hope I've answered your question, Frankie. More questions, Jamie?
Yeah. Hi. Thank you for your presentation, Raki. It was really like I just had no idea about this issue, and so thank you for like raising awareness and educating me about it. Like it's something I'll definitely be like telling people about now that so yeah, well done for all your like work on this. I was wondering whether you think. So I had two questions. Actually, one I had prepared, I had thought about before, and then one actually just now following on from what you were talking about with Frankie. Are you hopeful that at the upcoming COP that the representation of indigenous people in the decision-making processes is better than it has been? Is sufficient? Is there still a way to go? What do you think about that?
That's a very important question, and my feeling, to be honest, is that we didn't make the steps we need to make. If you see what kind of fundamental role indigenous peoples play, just regarding West Papua, we are the world's largest tropical island. I have a big say, representing 2 million indigenous West Papuans. How, you know, non-environmental organization is supporting us. How is that possible? They spend millions, you know, regarding this ecosystem restoration. How they're pointing the politicians, you know, we should listen to the scientists, but they themselves are not implementing it here in the Netherlands. I'm still, you know, knocking on doors, you know, demanding my seat on the table. It's still not happening. You know, I need a lot of patience. So we are absolutely not there yet. But I find hope within, you know, the young generations from LCOY, from Extinction Rebellion, the grassroots, who are understanding this. And they give me hope, because we have a huge momentum now in the Netherlands where the entire environmental movement, grassroots, are supporting this indigenous perspective, supporting West Papua, especially from the, you know, historical context in the Netherlands. But the big ones who have a big say, who have a lot of assets, still not moving the right direction at the speed we need, because they're saying, you know, time is running out. Well, start acting, the environmental organization. So, and this is so there's still a lot have to be done. But I'm optimistic because this grassroots movement are pushing this perspective to the center. That's what we try to do. And that's what I hope. I will be there in Glasgow because I know that's time to network, to build alliances, because that is basically what these big corporations and also the NGOs, e-NGOs who are not willing to listen, still not willing to listen, through the pressure. And that's basically where the optimism and hope is. The momentum is getting bigger, but time is our biggest enemy, right? So we need to build alliances, and that's what I try to do in COP.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I love that phrase you just said at the end. The momentum is getting bigger, but the time is the pressure. So yeah, definitely. Thank you for answering the questions. But I had just now the other question, which is sort of on a slightly different topic of what you kind of spoke about, and it was about the gold mine. I was interested in that I think you said that was an American company, and I was just wondering whether there's action in America, and this kind of grassroots action you're kind of talking about, to, you know, targeting that company and like making that link. I know obviously you've been highlighting the historical kind of links between the Netherlands and West Papua, but I was just wondering whether there's been much action there. Or
yeah, unfortunately not that much as I want to, but we've just making first steps with connecting movements such as, you know, representatives of Black Lives Matters, representatives of Sunrise Movement. So these are like, you know, epic movements which definitely could make a game-changing moment in the US. So yeah, it's just started, and you know, and this is where the lack of willingness from these e-NGOs facilitating us, because I do this beside my job. And if they really care about, you know, the climate crisis, they should facilitate the indigenous perspective as soon as possible, so we can make it, you know, much more fast happening. But the reality is, I need some patience and, you know, time to, you know, communicate. And if the corona restrictions allow travel over there. So yeah, we got some hiccups, but things are are just started.
That's great. That's good to hear. Thanks.
There's a question from Kate Foster as well. She asks if there's any examples we can use to think with, to talk about, or to help break the silence of how Indigenous peoples' use looks after peatlands.
Yeah, I think, everybody can be a voice. And if you look, what I just did is I just brought the numbers together, making this picture very clear. And that what I do, everybody can do. And that is what the momentum, the last Corona year in the Netherlands was, I think, the most successful year of a campaign, because I had a lot of opportunities to do guest lectures behind my screen, but a lot of students who did the same. So they were basically being a voice. They were basically me in another event. So they created opportunities where they can share this important perspective with fellow students or with fellow comrades within a grassroots movement. And that is how the momentum created and getting so big in the Netherlands and now expanding in the UK as well. So yeah, I think that's, as individual, I believe everybody can tell a story. And I believe my slogan is system change by story change. And that's what we do. And creating new, powerful, inspiring stories. That's all I do. And I believe that every individual can do that.
Exactly. Deirdre sends a link of Urgency, an organization, asking if they're also involved, helping with, I guess maybe with West Papua. Is that what you meant, Deirdre?
A friend is president of Urgency. If you want a connection, I'll happily link you in with everyone afterwards.
Absolutely.
Yeah, she's great.
Thank you.
And she's Irish as well, and she's Jewish, and she's Hungarian. So she's got a mixture of mindsets that will actually support your movements.
Sounds wonderful. Thank you so much for being an ally already. And I saw a question of Frankie, is that correct? Do you have toolkits for this? Yeah, we got, like, for example, campaign materials on our website. I will share it right in the chat, freewestpapua.org. We got leaflets, information kits and packages, but I can also prepare, basic presentations. If you are willing to give your own presentation at school or share with someone, we can create it. That's absolutely not a problem. I see a question of Oliver. How long have BP and Freeport-McMoRan been? Freeport-McMoRan, this world's largest gold mine in West Papua. This is the circumstance. Before we had this so-called referendum in 1969, which was facilitated by the United Nations, Freeport and the Indonesian government signed an agreement to exploit that world's largest gold mine just 2 years before, in 1967. So the outcome was basically already there. This referendum could not go to the West Papuans. So these were the power dynamics at the time. So huge powers who decided the West Papuans to not have, a fair say about the future. And BP, I do not know the exact date, but it was later than Freeport-McMoRan.
Does anybody else have any questions? If not, we can move on to Deirdre's poem. Yeah, great. Well, thank you again, Raki. That was really, really enlightening. So next up is Deirdre Lane. She's joining us from rural PD, Ireland. She's also a close collaborator and friend of RE-PEAT. Deirdre has spent a lot of time on and around peatlands for her work, but she also grew up surrounded by them. She is the intermediary consultant at Shamrock Springs and is active in encouraging people to address climate change. So she will now be performing a poem about peat bog mining. Thank you.
Before that, I'd like to thank you, because only now did I realize that I've lived in swamps and wetlands for so long. When I lived in Paris, I lived in the Marais, which is a swamp. And when I lived in London, I lived in Moorgate, which was a moor before. So I never noticed until our conversation before this how my life has been in the swamps. And then there was a certain American president who wanted to drain the swamps. It's like, wow, it just gives you an idea how supportive he is of wetlands. So recently I did a 6-month program on art and ecology. And at one point during the conversation, it was a very hot day. We were in the Irish Museum of Modern Art, and Rebecca's here in the audience as well. And did you ever go to a group event and there's one person who hogs everything? So that person was about to leave and people were exhausted from her. And then somebody said, but there's nothing we can do, the Chinese, la, la, la. And I went, yes, there is. You can divest, you can do. So they thought I was on a rant. I was just on I have to get my train and leave in 2 minutes. So then I was asked to do a rant officially as part of our performance. So I don't know if it was reverse psychology, Deirdre, do a rant, or, you can't just put somebody ranting on the spot. Mind you, I did rant at some guys today. I was wearing a t-shirt in 1970 in Copenhagen. It's like, oh God. So without further ado, from the footlands of the Bog of Allen, the Hill of Allen here in Kildare, which means Church of the Oak on the oak tree, instead of a rant, I came up with this little other rant. So my region is renowned for the goddess Bridget, and then the Christians took her over and created her as a saint. And if you're given a choice to be a goddess or a saint, choose goddess, because saints can't sin, the goddesses can. So today, I'm going to read you my little rant. I am Bridget of the Bog, alive yet dead, decomposing wealth, my body soft, spongy, quaky, decayed. My plants matter, I call them my peat people. My lungs are your lungs. Lungs, oxygen poor, nitrogen poor, yet those who chose to dwell along me thrive alive. Frogs in my bogs, lizards lounge on sunny days, tickling waders, restore, manage, preserve, conserve. Peat nature deserves reserves. Yet you slash and burn, you gash my cloak, you cut my core, you burn my flesh, my heaths, you heathens. Still, I swell. Frogs in my bogs, lizards lands and sunny days, restore, manage, preserve, conserve. In defiance, I rise a millimeter a year. Yes, I swell. Still, you slash me, cut and burn me. You need to mind me, yet you mind me. My cloak, steeped in rainfall, blankets bogs. My body blankets hills and the lowlands, the valleys and the highlands. You call them ecosystems, I call them welcomes. Home to the sundew and to the curlew, habitats to the wilds. Water through my veins you drain. I am that sponge and still you drain. I am the Irish Amazon. You slit with your sloan, still you cut me, slash and burn me, protect me. I am old and shrinking, still I swell. Keep peat in the ground, repeat, keep my peat in the ground, for the gorse, for the grouse, for the treasures, for the futures. More moors, not lesser moors. The grouse, go back calls. I sponge your floods. I capture toxic field and road runoff, where once my body rested with my peat people. My sisters in Siberia sweat and melt, revealing once hidden mammoth treasure. I slowly grew post a recent ice age. As climate changes, so we do too. Come, quick, play with me on my bogs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 feet to bounce in and on and on. Sloncha, you drink of my peat. Ishkabaha, infused with blessed lifeblood. The blood of the bogs. The blood of the boggrass on your soul. I protect peatland wildlife, yet you slash and burn and stash my grouse to flush a flash of fire. You shoot, you kill, still I swell with their every bloody drip. Meet me as I greet you on the fens, the bogs, the moors, the mires. My mist embraces you. My midge munching you. The great elk once leapt upon me, now he lies within me. Bog butter, bog bodies, gold torques, all lie hidden beneath. Mind me. Shh. Those birds who prey. Hen, harrier, nuzzle, and nest protected on my skin. Merlins hunt and feed on my underbelly, chasing meadow pipits, their favorite prey. So I mind them. Shh, those birds who prey. I mind them. The buzzards cry overhead. A falcon swoops at speed at prey. The cuckoo roosts home to me. The swallow comes to mate by me. The waders walk upon me. Vulture feathered friends. Their long bills peek inside my flesh as they too search and seek my food. The snipe bleats its tail feathers as it flies by, marking its territory on my chest. Snipe nest in tussocks on my face and fly by in their zigzag way. Naturally driven, motto of the bog cutter. Bogs shudder as your sausage machines claw my flesh and spew my blood into the cold, damp, open air. You sell my earth. What a price? Your share price? Is that a fair price? What's left of my blankets stripped mind away. Habitat destruction and predation, adaptation, mitigation. Mind me, don't mind me. Mindless greed. The call of the curlew gone, and still I yearn for its return, to once more share a full chat, to old feathered friends. Midges play with you, gentle nips as they chase all away with the fall of the cool eve on all. They mind and feed my bog friends. Mind me. Don't mind me. Is St Brigid of the bog? Is Mo and Misha? Je suis Mona. I am Mona, your friend and cover Mona. Mind me, ach Cohen and Moen. So,
Wow.
Sláinte from some of that peat whiskey.
Cheers. Wow, Deirdre, that was so powerful. I'm on the bridge of crying, actually.
It's important to cry
Yeah.
for what we've lost.
Mm-hmm.
We've lost centuries, a millimeter a year. We're losing so much to what?
Mm-hmm.
It's our heritage. It's our lungs. So these are things that we really have to preserve. So Raki, what you're doing is so powerful to get the message out that this is virgin land that needs to be protected. And there's so many different ways to have that conversation. The other day I was having a wellness conversation about mental health. And I thought, God, you know, the conversation is not getting out there. We're like an echo chamber of these beautiful bog loving people. So I thought for a minute, what if you woke up without a worry in the world? What if you woke up and you were the world? And you reached out and your Amazon was missing, you know, your blood was drained, you know, you were dehydrated. I think sometimes if you personify the conversation more, because we're so detached. Someone even likened farmers to me the other day. They sit on their tractors. They don't even have their hands in the soil anymore. So when you don't know where Papua New Guinea is, where you don't know where West Papua is, or what the people look like, what they say, how can I take the story to something I do understand? My lungs, I need to breathe, you know, make it about the me's, and bring the story to a younger generation who may never see the box. And at the rate we're going, they won't. And it makes it all the very more poignant to me because the head office of Board now, Mona, is here in my town. Since 1970, they've had the remit to save the bogs, and they've done anything but. So how, as a resident of the town, how do you respect the heritage until now, And if you and I had a list of things to do since 1970, by Jesus, you'd lose your job. Nobody's going to jail for this corporate destruction. Nobody is going to jail for not honoring their obligations. And the stakeholder intergenerational obligations boils down to volunteers, like the amazing people in RE-PEAT. So, you know, I'll continue ranting every time I can, but it's just, how can we rant in an inclusive way? Because you don't want to be that person in the party no one wants to talk to. So thank you. And thank you, RE-PEAT, for all the amazing, amazing stuff you do. So there's one event happening this Saturday, actually, for the global climate strike and parade. We're actually having an event here locally about local communities and boglands. So my own bogland myself, I've preserved. And it's so beautiful. You actually get lost going into it these days because it's so overgrown. And it's much higher than the area either side. So just in the last 11 years or so, it has made a difference. So, you know, you're welcome to pop over soon.
I'm going to ask a question, if that's okay. I just add the spotlight to my face while I'm doing it. So you're talking also in the poem, you also have some words in Gaelic, Deirdre, as well. And I have seen like some of the work from like Manchan Magan.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and like kind of the power of language and how kind of people in Ireland reclaiming and learning better than, oh no, am I frozen?
No?
Oh, now you are. It took a second. That was happening also in our previous meetings today.
Well, actually, that's a colonization again. The colonizers strip you of your language. So if you can't communicate in a method that links you to the land, then you're obliged to use their words.
Yeah. So I froze, sorry, my internet's not so good. Again, you just jumped in there and already preempted what I was going to say, so that's great. But so you think then like kind of the reclaiming of language has really important connections towards protect. I know that in Gaelic there are so many words to describe peatlands and bogs and all of these like little nuances that maybe English doesn't capture. So kind of just if you have a few thoughts or you want to kind of reflect a little bit on kind of the power of reclaiming this language, and then also across the world, the power of language towards biodiversity and having that kind of cultural biodiversity as well, because of course they're so interlinked. I don't know, I guess that's what I was thinking of, and maybe you want to share a few things about it.
Certainly. So for example, the townlands around here, so my town is called New Bridge. It's a garrison town, so like there's no romance there. So how do you actually, if you take the Latin, like Umaris Peatland Park, so that actually links to a smaller bog area. So even if you're looking for a house, for example, if you're going to live in Salins, the place of the Sally rod, Sally trees need wet roots, so you're not going to build there. So, you know, how do you reclaim the language of the land in such a way that you understand the land? And Irish is a very interesting language. We only have 20 letters, not 26. So if you're listening to spoken Irish, like sloncha, Slán, we say good health, sláncha. Slán means health. You know, our cheers is health to you. So slán means goodbye, health, and ch means to you. So when we say sláncha, we're actually wishing people good health. So all the words beginning with S in Ireland are sad. No, they're happy words, sport and sexy words, but the words beginning with D, like Deirdre, means the one of sorrows. So druk means bad, dona, Dona means bad as well. Dun, dove, all the d, they're depressing words. So even linguistically, subliminally, I can't even speak English. I do speak 5 languages, by the way. You do have a different sense of the language being spoken. So like the word in Irish for silence is cunas. You know, if the teacher says cunas, you know what it means. You know, it's a beautiful reflective word. So again, in other languages, how can we, I think somebody told me a language dies a day. Like these are very basic human skills that we need to focus on as well. You know, why would you let your language go? Again, it's the language of the oppressor coming in, strip them of their ability to communicate. Like Ireland once upon a time was a land of saints and scholars. Then, of course, famine and 700 years of oppression happened. But how do you preserve the language linked to the hands and the bog and the landmarks? So yeah, big topic.
Frankie?
I have a very different question, changing the vibe again. But maybe, I mean, yours and Raki's talks were very different, but maybe one thing which you said at the end, which does connect them, is potentially this possibility of legal frameworks helping, that if corporations were actually being held accountable under legal frameworks and people were actually getting, you know, prison sentences or something, whether this is actually something that you see. I'm curious about both of your perspectives on this, like whether you see this on the horizon, like happening in the process, or whether you see it quite far off, or how you see that dynamic.
So somebody who's part of the divestment movement from a financial background, the non-financial global reporting systems insist that all companies report under environmental, social governance. So investors now are looking for non-financial ways of reporting. So it's very difficult to ignore it in the room, and especially the nature that you guys have over there is so rare to have intact. So that's definitely a way, and I'll link you up with the divestment campaigners in the Netherlands I've been working with for some time. In fact, they just had a massive win today, announced just now on Twitter from ABP. So I was very much part of the divestment movement there. And again, it's about educating investors as well. So it's so easy to say, well, one point, I'll stop ranting. Bankers borrow the most money because they have to keep up their own assets, etc. So until you get through to people that your salary will be linked to a non-financial reporting, for example. So then they'll start rethinking, actually, what can I do? What is moving? Where does the investor want to spend the money? So yeah, it's a huge conversation, but it is happening in terms of non-financial reporting and jail for those exploiting what's going on. And in fact, I'm linked to legal companies globally as well that are doing amazing work that Raki, I'll very gladly join you into.
Yeah, thank you so much. Just what I can add to that is indeed I'm supporting and following all these, you know, court rulings in the Netherlands towards these big polluters such as Shell, and now against ABP, the Dutch biggest pension funds and the fifth of Europe, the biggest. So it's a relevant player regarding investments, which they will stop now towards fossil fuels. So that's a good thing. So yeah, I think we don't have a choice at this point to choose what we want. So we need every instrument we can pick to stop this destructive pollution. You know, if you just watch what is happening, that we as citizens, brave citizens, got a ticket, which is perfect. If we throw garbage outside our home in the wrong way, but these corporations destroy millions of hectares, killing people, will get away with that. How is that possible? These are the norms we have accepted as society in the global north. So why is it happening? Because we allow it to happen, and the institutions which educate us, the mainstream media, don't give it the time which we should give. If you ask indigenous peoples how they take care of the land, we are part of that nature. It's not in our imagination that we will destroy, you know, the land which give us life and food. And these narratives, which Sister Lane have mentioned, indeed, it's about storytelling. How is it possible that these great corporations get away with such a magnitude of destruction? Because the systems allows it. But we are the system, so we can restore the adjustment in the same institutions and systems by telling these stories, which we are doing today here. But it should be done at schools from day one when they go to school, at media, you know, stations. This should be mainstream storytelling. Only that way we can reconnect people and people with the environment. And that is what we do with indigenous perspective. We make them feel the uneasiness what is happening on our land. If I told them How do you feel if a oil pipeline, will go through your house, killing your people, destroying your culture? How will you feel? That is exactly what is happening for 50 years in my homeland. But you are crying because there must be made a transition towards green. So you say you are suffering, but we have this interaction. So we need the interaction of feelings, and that is where storytelling can have a big potential, and that's what we do today here. But yes, I love the court rulings. But if you look at the court ruling from Friends of the Netherlands towards Shell, this judge, the problematic of this outcome is that yes, climate legislation, they win it, so we need it to tackle it, which is a good signal. But the judge outcome is outlined that it's about future generations. My people are dying for more than 60 years. So it shows the problematic position of the Dutch court, which basically mention about whose lives they carry. And this is where we should keep educating, keep them sharp. Yes, it's a win because we got something, but it's not far enough. Because if the Dutch court has the same ethic responsibility about the peoples in Nigeria, Shell was already been punished. And that's the this problematic position of courts in the global north. We know whose lives are important, whose lives not. That's basically the outcome, the conclusion of what we see in this legislation. But yes, we cannot afford to not have those wins because it's good for the momentum and time is running out. But we must have these discussions as well. It's not going far enough. Our lives are as much as relevant as those in the global north. That's it. Thank you.
Jamie?
I just wanted to bring it back to COP26 and just ask ask everyone actually, just because I haven't ever been to the COPs before, but just whether there is space in for these kind of creative approaches and just to explore is there space in the conference for for poems, for art and things to kind of expand that or is it not really not really there? Because I don't know, I think it's it's a good, because it ties in, it's as Raki said, it's all about storytelling, and I would say that having a kind of, we talk about a lot of RE-PEAT, this kind of a creative approach, intentionally there, can contribute to that. So I was just wondering whether there's opportunities for that at COP or not.
2 points. So I'm part of the craftivist movement, which is a gentle art of protest. But also for COP21, we did a global climate strike, hunger strike, representing the day since the very first day of COP21 that no action really took place. So some initiatives have a positive result. The positive result, which surprised me in this country, were the Republican prisoner movement that came on board the climate statement because they knew how serious we were. But the reality of that was a lot of people thought, no, you don't do that. You don't go that far. It's like, I'm sorry. There are people, their crops have failed. There are people starving. The very least we can do is represent the days since day one of COP21. So there's different ways of having a dialogue outside of save the whales, save the polar bear, that we need to do, because the traditional dialogues isn't working strongly enough. How do we get outside the echo chambers and pierce the conscience of people to make a difference? So yeah, there's definitely another way outside of the academic route and policy route that you mentioned earlier.
Yes, and if I may add just a small thing, yes, I will be there in COP26. It will be my first time as well, because I strongly believe in collaborating, meeting people, sharing stories, and that's what I'm going to do. And we're going to launch the Green State Vision on the 4th of November, so that will be my main task, to share flyers with meet movements, to connect and to collaborate. But my agenda is getting fuller and fuller, but I will be there. So if anybody's there, I just shared not a website, but the name of the organization's COP26 coalition, and you will see every kind of events that were happening there, and you can pick whatever side events you want to to join. So I think it's very interesting to meet people there and connect and share stories.
Did you mention it was accessible online as well?
Perhaps several of those events would be, shared via online stream as well. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. Well, I think if nobody has any more questions, perhaps we can say that this has been a successful episode 8 of the UK Anthology series.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Deirdre and Raki, that was both very, like I felt physically both of your stories in very different ways, but they really affected me both. So thank you so much for sharing your lives and your minds. Thank you.
I want to thank you all as well, and RE-PEAT for having me and listening to the other story, which gives me a really warm feeling of humanity and allyship, and that's the spirit and energy which keeps me going every single day, what we just having now. So thank you for that, and I hope to see you soon, perhaps in Glasgow and otherwise another opportunity. Take a good care of yourself, because Mother Earth needs us all. Cheers.